Hi everyone! Today's going to be a great review today because I'm talking about my favorite animated film of the year so far. One that I think needs a lot more attention than it's gotten, other than from some controversies that I'm afraid I'll have to mention. Isle of Dogs. This review was suggested by my friend Brianna. Unfortunately, it's been on the table for a long time because I had previously seen it in the theaters before I started this channel, and then it went out, so then I had to wait a while. Yeah. So it's been on the table for a long time. So, like I said, this is my favorite anime film of the year for various reasons, because it's just so different from anything else we're going to see this year. Wes Anderson directed this film, and he previously directed Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fans of that film are going to absolutely adore this one. And I think I like to this one even more than that because an original story gave him a lot more room to play around. So, speaking of the story, let's start there. The story for this movie is very mature, and it's helped by the rating of this movie. While most anime films go for PG to get that little bit of edge so kids don't think, this is a movie for babies, but enough that they'll be able to see it. But this film tried for, and it earned its PG-13 rating. Yeah, this isn't a movie for kids by any stretch. Some things happen are quarantine, references to mating, assassination, corruption, suicide references, characters living and nearly dying on. So it's not a case of just putting a few dirty jokes and then it's adult. No. There is a definite story here that makes the film very adult and earns its PG-13 rating. So, as dog flu breaks out, dogs at the order of Mayor Kobayashi are taken to Trash Island in quarantine, where conditions are less than ideal and they're all starving. They have to avoid dangers like compactors or being stuck in their cage and dying as one dog does in the beginning. Luckily, it's none of that scene, but the fact that it's all there. So then Atari comes in, a 12-year-old boy from Japan and the nephew of Mayor Kobayashi. And he's looking for his dog Spots, who was the first one to be chosen for the island and sent there. So then, Chief, our protagonist, as well as four other dogs, Rex, King, Duke, and Boss, all set off to find Spots. And Chief isn't sure about humans, but then he has some bonding scenes with Atari, which are some of the best parts of the film. Meanwhile, Kobayashi is trying for re-election while keeping the dogs on the island, and there's just so much corruption with this film that makes it clear why it didn't get a PG rating. Some of the villains here are some of the most realistic ones I've seen in an animated film in a while. And references to things like mating, and it's not just sex jokes, the ideas of suicide or characters needing to eat one of their friends, their leader, in order to survive. Ooh. There's a lot going on in this film. It's very heavy. It still has some good comedy, though. Some of the characters are really funny, especially the four dogs outside of Chief. One of them is voiced by Bill Murray, but Rex, the leader, always wants to take a vote, which leads to some good comedy there. And this film has a very unique way of doing dialogue. Most animated films, when they're set in another country, have us all hearing it as English. Mulan, as an example, or Beauty and the Beast, we don't hear them speaking in French or Chinese, respectively, but switch them around. I realize I made a mistake there with the order, but I digress. So, this film, on the other hand, since it's in a time where news anchors and translators would be around, as well as exchange students, uses those to its advantage to put in some Japanese dialogue and then have a translator over it, which some people might find really annoying, but I think is actually interesting, and it found a way to not talk down to the audiences. Of course, some people think this is guilty of cultural appropriation, but I don't really think I agree there, because honestly, if they didn't do that and they just had them all speak English, then somebody would complain that movies are set in Japan and then no Japanese language is used at all. And you can't have it both ways. You really can't. So I think this is a creative way to do it and still get a little bit of Japanese feel to it, even if it can't be done completely in an American film. On to the animation. Stop motion, I think, is a medium of animation that should be utilized more than it really is now. There's something special about the way that everything has to be created as opposed to just designing it on a computer or drawing it on a page. So it makes it more special. And this one was some of the best stop motion I've seen. The humans all look really realistic. And the dogs also look great. And it's not afraid to get uncomfortable looking at times. Red eyes for Chief, around the reddish ear after Atari takes off his helmet and the little bit of propeller stuck in around his head. Yeah, it does leave a mark and it lasts for a bit. So the movie's not afraid to look uncomfortable at times. The best scene of that comes around the end, but I don't want to spoil that because this movie is one that I really want everyone who watches this review to see, and more than any movie I've done so far, by the way, share this. Please share this. And let's see. Other great aspects of the animation are the lighting, as well as dark elements. For spotlights, for emphasis, to dark for shadows, for a sense of mystery. Everything in this film just looks so gorgeous. And I really wish it got more attention because I want more movies that look just like this or close enough. So, on to the characters. Our main character is Chief. Chief is apprehensive towards humans and he doesn't really believe in masters. He's been astray most of his life, other than one household that a biting problem wound up getting him kicked out of. Over the course of the film, though, he warms up to Atari and the two form a bond. Now, on to Atari. Since I don't speak Japanese, and I'm sure that many people watching this film might not, you might be wondering, how does Atari work as a character if you can't understand what he's saying most of the time? And most of the time, there's not a translator for Atari at all. So, let's see. How could I put this perfectly? They utilize it through inflections of the voice more than the words themselves. If I was to start speaking Spanish and saying something, or French or Japanese, I'm not going to, because one, I don't have anything planned, and two, I'm not as that fluent. but you would get an idea of how I was feeling, even if you didn't know what I was saying, which is really done well here. The child actor for him really did a great job of giving his lines, even though we aren't quite sure what he's saying. And he has a great sense of loyalty for Spots, and then which moves on to Chief later in the movie. And he's also just a kid sometimes. He wants to go down the pagoda slide when he come across an abandoned theme park. So he's definitely very childish in a good way, and just so identifiable that it really doesn't matter whether we can understand him or not. The other dogs don't have as much time as Chief, with the exception of Rex, the unofficial leader, or the not leader in the case of Chief, of the other three dogs, Boss, King, and Duke. So, Rex is the voice of reason for a lot of the movie for Chief, and is the one to try to make a ballot over anything in favor of everything. Usually Chief will go against it, which leads to some great jokes throughout the movie. And then there's Nutmeg, a girl dog that was in the dog show, and she is sort of another morality change similar to Tartari for Chief. In fact, she's the one that convinces him to go with Atari in the first place, which is the one to really set him off on the journey and to get him to go. So, even though they don't have many scenes together, there's a decent amount of chemistry between Chief and Nutmeg. Other dogs that show up are Oracle, who can predict the future because she understands TV, and she's voiced by Tilda Swinton, aka the White Witch, so that makes it even funnier. Now, on to our human characters. Besides Atari, there's Tracy, who's an exchange student and the only human that regularly speaks English in the film other than the translator. And she has a grudge on Atari because of his devotion to his dog Spots, and she's trying to uncover any conspiracy theories, and she's a nice, strong female character, especially since none of the female dogs are that prominent in the movie other than there's few scenes they're in. And now we have our villain, Mayor Kobayashi. He is corrupt and will do anything to get power, even killing people and lying to the public. Getting dogs out of the way is his plan, like all the Kobayashis before him. But at the same time, he has a slight sense of honor, and he does care about his nephew deep down inside. So he makes for a layered antagonist, even if the layers only show up around the end of the film. Then there's Spots, but again, he's someone that we find out more about in the story, and he's initially very loyal to Atari, and it's clear that they have a very deep connection, even if things may not work out for them throughout the movie. So the characters of this film are great. It's just sometimes certain ones like King and the other two dogs, Duke and Boss, just don't get a chance to shine in comparison to Chief and Atari, which is a shame, but I'm not complaining because the characters we do get to spend time with are great. Now, what does this movie mean to me? Why do I want this to win over Incredibles 2? Well, for one, I enjoyed it a lot more than Incredibles 2. I didn't hate the movie because if you saw my review, you saw that I gave it a very positive one. But at the same time, This is totally new and different. It has a storyline that's more mature than most anime films, and characters that are so different. And like I said, the aspect of the Japanese and the translation over it, all of this is done in a way that's just unlike other animated films that I've seen in a long time. And then there's the fact it's stop motion. Now, I'm not saying the medium is the only thing that deserves to make a movie win, but hear me out. The first animated film to win the Best Animated Feature was 2001 Shrek, and then 2002 Academy Awards. So, we have 17 winners. Spirited Away is our one winner for hand-drawn, and Wallace and Gromit is our one winner for stop motion. Other than that, it's been almost all CG, and almost all of them have been Pixar. I'd say a good 60%. So it's clear that there is a standard winner, and that's what The Incredibles 2 would be. And the problem there is we're getting more and more like films that they think will win, which isn't a bad thing at all. Quality stories are good, and I think we're getting more and more outside of Pixar now, from Disney and oftentimes from DreamWorks. But at the same time, what I'm saying isn't that we're going for the stronger storylines and connections of stories. We're going for CGI or trying to be like the films that might win instead of trying to be artistic and different. CGI is seen as the go-to because it's easier, it's cheaper, it's quicker, and it gets people more in the seats. Kids aren't interested in hand-drawn or stop motion anymore, and that's a shame. It really does deserve more recognition than it gets because all the work that goes into those mediums, and it's so imbalanced. It's a problem I've had with the Best Animated Features for a long time, and any hand-drawn films are always independent, and they're not given the amount of theaters that a Pixar or a DreamWorks movie are, not even close. The last two Studio Ghibli films, and this is Studio Ghibli, the most popular anime studio there is, were overlooked pretty much, and I didn't hear about them until they came to DVD. Take that to something like a Pixar movie or even bad animated films like Norm of the North that get plenty of publicity because people think that it will get it because it's the stereotypical animated comedy, or something that will be the great big epic like The Incredibles. So it's easy to say that certain types of movies don't have much of a chance, and this is one of those films. But if this movie gets recognition, I'm not saying it's going to win. It probably isn't going to, since, like I said before, stop motion and hand drawn, they haven't won outside of those two instances, really. But if it gets enough recognition and enough people talking about it, we may wind up with more movies like this in the future, with more mature storylines, more interesting art styles, and something that's just so different that it can't be compared to other movies. So Isle of Dogs is a very unique, beautiful, and fun film with a deep storyline at the same time. It's unlike any anime film I've seen for so long. So I think it definitely deserves all the recognition it gets, and then some. It needs way more, honestly. So, like I said, please share this video, Not just to get myself some views or anything, but I really think this movie deserves its place as one of the greatest animated films of the year, if not getting the best, at least being up there and talk about over some of the CGI animated comedies. So, thanks again for watching, and please, if you have a movie you want me to review, please leave in the comment section below. Until then, see you later.